Do we need to open the doors? Okay.
I have extra copies of the Pago speech. Would you like it? It's one page.
Of the what?
Of the Pago speech. Would you like an extra
No,
copy?
do I need it?
No.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna do some quick voting. We were gonna do the Decade Act, talk about that, but obviously we're running behind. We were gonna do the blueprint, but evidently EEE has yet to get to that today. So we'll see where that goes. I'm going to skip the next one. So let's do 508. Where's Philip?
8. Still got my 2 bills.
Next one?
The 2 bills, amusement tax for that transportation stuff.
We'll just have to get to it. 508. 508. Make sure you tell Erica to put those on.
The title I can do from memory.
Blind Industries.
Senate Bill 508 is it's identical to Senate Bill 795. It was a bill related to procurement requirements for services and products offered by blind industries. It was just not unanimous on the Senate floor, so that's why it's not on the consent.
Move favorable.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 833.
833 is a local bill authorizing Carroll County to issue public facilities bonds up to $36.9 million.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 1028.
1028, this is a joint committee on pensions bill. This is the bill dealing with the Board of Trustees repealing the objective criteria committee, moving those functions to a new staffing and compensation committee. There are amendments you should have on your desk that add the amendments that were added onto the Senate bill. Those amendments were not done to the House bill, so the amendments would conform the House bill to match what passed the Senate unanimously.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have a consent calendar here. Voting list number 12. These are all bills that passed unanimously. The Senate versions passed unanimously in the body.
Move favorable on consent calendar. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Had one more.
What do you have?
Just the death benefits bill. Just needed a death
Another
benefit.
one?
The death benefits.
Okay. One more?
House Bill 76, you should have an amendment. This is the bill authorizing the public death benefits for 911 specialists and then clarifying the presumptions for PTSD. There was a technical amendment that's needed to both bills, correcting a cross-reference. So that's what the amendment is before you. I believe the House should be doing the same thing to the Senate bill.
Move favorable.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Mr. Romans? Mr. Romans, your folks ready? Mr. Romans? Mr. Romans, your folks, good? Great. All right, let's get started.
Going alphabetical? Yep.
Yep, with education. Mic on? Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the members of the subcommittee. Along with myself, we had Senator Joanne Benson, Senator Jack Bailey, and Senator Paul Quarterman. And the committee staff, Erica Schisler, and the budget analysts, Natalie Andrade, Sarah Baker, Scott Benson, Patrick Frank, Andrew Gray, Laura Hyde, Madeline Miller, Kelly Norton, David Proppert, Sam Quist, Yashadara Rai, Micah Richards, and Elizabeth Weibel, and Mary Beth Brisky, who edited this document. Starting on page 1 for the Board of Public Works, the committee concurred with the House to adopt a contingent fund reduction and 2 pieces of narrative. On page 3 for the Executive Department, Governor, the subcommittee concurred with the House to delete 2 new positions. On page 4 for the Historic St. Mary's City Commission, subcommittee deleted 7 new positions. On pages 5 through 8 for the Governor's Office for Children, the subcommittee concurred with the House to add a section restricting funds pending submission of a report and adopt 1 piece of narrative. The subcommittee also partially restored funding for the Enough program and the Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund grant. On pages 9 through 11 for the Interagency Commission on School Construction, subcommittee restricted funds pending the submission of 3 reports. On pages 12 and 13, for the Maryland Stadium Authority, the subcommittee restored a reduction for a grant to the annual Maryland 5-Star at Fairhill and concurred with language restricting funds. The subcommittee also reduced debt service in 2 programs. The subcommittee concurred with a $17 million reduction to the Racing and Community Development Financing Fund. However, we have reconsidered and would like to modify this reduction to $16 million. On pages 14 through 20 for the Department of Information Technology, the subcommittee concurred with the House to restrict funds pending 2 reports, reduce funds for 4 purposes, delete 2 positions, add contingent language to transfer funds, and adopt narrative requesting a report. The subcommittee also adopted language to restrict funds pending submission of a report on statewide agile teams. On pages 21 through 25 for the Department of General Services, the subcommittee concurred with the House to restrict funds pending 2 reports and adopt 2 pieces of narrative. The subcommittee also deleted vacant positions and requested a report on efforts to implement an executive order, including actions to modernize procurement. On pages 26 through 31 for the Department of Labor, the subcommittee concurred with the House to delete positions, adopt a report, restrict funds pending a report on repeat audit findings, and add contingent language. The subcommittee also rejected a $2 million reduction for cyber workforce grants. On pages 32 through 40 for the Maryland State Department of Education, the subcommittee concurred with the House to add language to reduce personnel expenditures, delete positions, and adopt 4 pieces of narrative. The subcommittee also partially restored funding to the Maryland School Leadership Academy and adopted 2 pieces of narrative to study artificial intelligence in K-12 education and commercial driver's license education. On pages 41 through 49 for MSDE Aid to Education, the subcommittee concurred with the House to strike contingent language on 2 blueprint-related actions and adopt 6 pieces of narrative. The subcommittee also restored language from the budget and as introduced, partially restored a blueprint reduction and added 2 pieces of narrative on registered teacher apprenticeship programs and unassigned fund balances. Additionally, the subcommittee added contingent language to the appropriation in the budget as introduced of $9 million for the Collaborative Time Innovation Demonstration Grants. However, to align this action with the committee's proposed change to this reduction, the committee would like to modify the contingent appropriation to $8 million. On page 50, for MSDE funding for educational organizations, the subcommittee concurred with the House to add language. On page 51, for the Maryland Center for School Safety, the subcommittee concurred with the House to reduce general funds and add special funds for the School Resource Officer Program. On pages 52 and 53, for the Accountability and Implementation Board, the subcommittee concurred with the House to request one piece of narrative. On pages 54 and 55, for Morgan State University, the subcommittee concurred with the House to restrict funds for a report. The subcommittee also rejected a report because the agency provided the requested information. On page 56, for St. Mary's College of Maryland, the subcommittee restricted funds pending the submission of a report on agency actions to address audit findings. On page 57, for the Maryland Public Broadcasting Commission, subcommittee concurred with the House to add language to restrict funds pending a report. On page 58, for the University of Maryland Global Campus, subcommittee concurred with the House to adopt one piece of narrative. On pages 59 through 64, for the Maryland Higher Education Commission, student financial assistance, the subcommittee concurred with the House to reduce funds to 2 programs and adopt 2 pieces of narrative. The subcommittee also partially restored funding to the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship Program, restricted funds for a report on the Educational Excellence Award Program, and adopted one piece of narrative for a report on outreach to police officers and probation agents. On pages 65 through 68, for state support for higher education institutions, the first 3 items are technical and reflect actions previously taken by the subcommittee. The subcommittee also concurred with the House to adopt narrative for 2 reports. On page 69, for Baltimore City Community College, the subcommittee concurred with the House to adopt a report. On pages 70 through 76, for the Department of Commerce, subcommittee concurred with the House to reduce funding for 8 programs, restrict funding for 1 program, and adopt one piece of narrative. The subcommittee also reduced funding for 2 additional programs and partially restored funding to BioHub Maryland. Finally, on page 77, for the State Reserve Fund, the subcommittee partially restored funding in the dedicated purpose account for the Sunny Day Fund and modified contingent language. I move adoption of the subcommittee report. Want to vote?
Any questions on the report? Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Great job.
That concludes our report, as amended.
Health and Human Services.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the members of the respective Health and Human Services Subcommittee, which is Senator Shelley Heddleman, Senator J.B. Jennings, and Senator Craig Zucker. I also like to thank my fellow peers to my side. I look at them as my wing people, Mr. Philip Anthony, and also Ms. Naomi Kamara. Colleagues, I'd also like to thank all of our budget analysts that have helped us navigate these waters, and starting with Ms. Natalie Andrade, Scott Benson, Suvaksha Bugel, Ann Braun, Victoria Martinez, David Propert, Yashada Misra, Micah Richards, Elizabeth Wable, and Tanya Zimmerman. And I'd also like to thank Dominic Sinelli, who edited this respective report. Colleagues, beginning on page 1, with the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending the submission of a report. On pages 2 and 3, in the Governor's Board, Commissions, and Offices, the subcommittee concurred with the House to add language restricting funds pending a report and concurred with narrative adopted by the House to request a report. In addition, the subcommittee deleted new positions added in the supplemental budget. Mr. Chair, on page 4, in the Department of Aging, the subcommittee struck language reducing funds from the senior care program in fiscal 2025. In the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, on page 5, the subcommittee concurred with the committee narrative requesting a report on new positions in the backlog management. Colleagues, beginning on page 6, in the Military Department, the subcommittee concurred with 2 pieces of narrative requesting reports and rejected the deletion of 5 long-term vacant positions. Beginning on page 9, in the Maryland Health Benefit Exchange, the subcommittee concurred with a reduction of general funds, narrative requesting a report on the reinsurance program, and language to make funding contingent on legislation. Mr. Chair, beginning on page 11, in the West North Avenue Development Authority, the subcommittee concurred with the language making funding contingent on legislation and rejected a reduction in general funds for grants. In the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, on pages 13 through 15, the subcommittee concurred with the language restricting funds pending 2 reports on IT projects and narrative requesting 2 reports on vacant positions. We also added language restricting funds pending a report on long-term vacancies. And on page 16 and 17, in the Property Tax Assessment Appeals Board, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report and concurred with the narrative requesting MFR data. Actions related to the Maryland Department of Health are on page 18 through 53. And for the first page, on page 18, in the Office of Inspector General for Health, the subcommittee concurred with the House to delete positions added in the supplemental budget. In the Health Professional Boards and Commissions, on page 19, the subcommittee concurred with the reduction of funds to address a technical error. Mr. Chair, in Public Health Services, beginning on page 20, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on the local health match requirement and concurred with a reduction of general funds. The subcommittee also modified language restricting funds pending a change to how core public health services funding is budgeted. However, I move to amend, Mr. Chair. This action is shown in the additional page and concur with the House, the blue page on your desk. On page 23, in the Prevention and Health Promotion Administration, we concur with a reduction in general funds to mandated level. Actions related to the Behavioral Health Administration begin on page 24, colleagues. The subcommittee modified language restricting funds pending the submission of data. The subcommittee also added annual language to 2 programs restricting funds for provider reimbursements to that purpose. In addition, the subcommittee rejected 3 pieces of language, restricted funds to address pediatric hospital overstays, restrict funds for the purpose of providing drug detection products in public higher education institutions, and reduce general funds in fiscal 2025. The subcommittee also added language restricting funds for the Behavioral Health Crisis Response Grant Program and adopted narrative on the program. Mr. Chair, we concurred with the reduction of general funds in the Community Services Program. The subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting reports on pediatric hospital overstays in the Clifton T. Perkins Hospital Center. And we adopted new narrative requesting reports on the new ASO transition and grants to core service agencies. The subcommittee concurred with a technical correction to the supplemental budget. Actions pertaining to the Developmental Disabilities Administration begins on page 33, colleagues. The subcommittee concurred with a technical correction to language in the supplemental budget and 3 pieces of language restricting funds pending reports on fiscal 2025 closeout activity, community service spending, and the resolution of repeat audit findings. And concurred with annual language restricting funding in the community services program to that purpose only. The subcommittee also concurred with 4 pieces of language restricting cost containment in DDA and added 2 pieces of language restricting funds pending a report on the implementation of cost containment actions and specifying requirements for restoring dedicated hours. Under Medicaid, beginning on page 41, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on the end-of-wait activities and concurred with the House to add language restricting funds for provider reimbursements for Medicaid, the Maryland Children's Health Program, and the Medicaid-related behavioral health reimbursements to those purposes. The subcommittee also concurred with the House to reduce funds for the Population Health Incentive Program, to fund rates for managed care organizations at the lowest actuarially sound level, to level fund physician evaluation and management rates, to account for enrollment expectations under Medicaid and the Healthy Babies Initiative, for a fiscal 2025 deficiency based on availability of other funds, and to delete 8 long-term vacant positions. The subcommittee also concurred with 5 pieces of narrative requesting reports. Beginning on page 51, in the Health Regulatory Commissions, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on the alignment of the AHEAD model with Medicare Advantage and amended the contingent reduction for the Coordinated Community Support Partnership Fund. The subcommittee also adopted narrative requesting a report on apprenticeships. Subcommittee actions pertaining to the Department of Human Services begin on page 54 in the Office of the Secretary. The subcommittee concurred with language restricting funds pending a report on fiscal 2025 closeout information. Actions pertaining to Social Services Administration begins on page 56. First, the subcommittee modified the due date of a report on the hospital and hotel stays. The subcommittee also concurred with 2 pieces of language restricting funds pending submission of reports and concurred with 2 pieces of narrative requesting reports on the implementation of the Family First Prevention Services Act on child fatalities. In the Office of Technology for Human Services, on pages 61 and 62, the subcommittee concurred with the House to adopt narrative requesting a report on MD Think. On pages 63 through 65 in the Foster Care Maintenance and Child Care Welfare Services Program, the subcommittee concurred with 3 pieces of language restricting funds to that purpose and concurred with 2 pieces of narrative requesting reports. The subcommittee also modified committee narrative requesting monthly data on out-of-home placement of children and youth to request information about a new dashboard. In the Assistance Payments Program, Mr. Chair, beginning on page 65, the subcommittee concurred with annual language restricting funds to that purpose and reducing funds based on caseload levels and spending needs to realign funds to an administrative program. The added funds related to the realignment are shown under the Family Investment Administration. The subcommittee also concurred with narrative requesting a report on program participation. On page 69, in the Child Support Administration, the subcommittee concurred with the House to adopt narrative requesting child support performance reports. In the Family Investment Administration, beginning on page 70, the subcommittee concurred with 3 pieces of language restricting funds pending resolution of audit findings, quarterly reports on application processing and case closures, and implementation of the voluntary settlement agreement. In addition, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on grants management. In the House, Office of Home Energy Programs, beginning on page 74, colleagues. The subcommittee concurred with the reduction of general funds for miscellaneous personnel expenses and a reduction of special funds in fiscal 2025 and 2026 for communication expenses. The subcommittee also concurred with language restricting funds pending a report, language restricting funds for energy assistance benefits, and narrative requesting MFR data. Lastly, in the Department of Housing and Community Development, on pages 78 and 79, the subcommittee concurred with the House to delete a new position added in the supplemental budget and adopted narrative regarding the implementation of rental assistance for community schools family program. Colleagues, and on page 80, the subcommittee increased the amount restricted pending a report on a meeting to discuss child fatalities. Mr. Chair, I'd just like to give one more shout out to every DLS analyst, because that's what I felt like reading this report for this long extended period, and move adoption of the subcommittee report as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it second? Second. Any questions? Okay, so I'm going to move we adopt. We changed the slightly the motion to separate page 51, which is Health Services Cost Review Commission, the budget amendment that begins on that and ends on the next page. So we'll move the remainder of the report. All those in favor?
Aye.
And then on that page 51, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Everybody, great job. Public safety?
Afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the Budget and Taxation Committee, reports for the Public Safety, Transportation, Environment Committee. First, I'd like to thank the members of my subcommittee, our Vice Chair, Senator Jim Rosapep, Senator Karen Lewis Young, and Senator Johnny Ray Salling. I'd also like to thank Deneen Banks, who staffs the subcommittee, also the budget analysts. I'm a new subcommittee chair, so I'm pretty needy, so they held up. Catherine Barber, Scott Benson, Sylvestra Bujel, and forgive me if I jack your name up first time, right? Patrick Frank, Andrew Gray, Victoria Martinez, Steve McCullough, Madeline Miller, Jacob Polikoff, David Propert, Sam Quist, Michael Richards, Yashad Hara Rai, and Elizabeth Wable. I'd also like to thank our technical team. Mr. Chairman, we were pretty busy in budget this year, and we had to switch some folks in and out. So that team includes Ms. Kim Landry, Ms. Jane Wampler, Ms. Favor, the fellow for our committee, Obasio Lu. Let me say that one more time. Obasio Lu. Sorry about that. Taylor and Miss Taylor Glasscock, our mainstay. So, also Brett Ogden and Benjamin Norum, who edited the document. On page 1 through 6, in the judiciary, the subcommittee concurred with language deleting 5 new positions, restricting funds for the implementation of the DeWolf versus Richmond, and restricting funds for the appointed attorney program pending submission of a report. The subcommittee also concurred with general fund reductions totaling approximately $8 million for 12 purposes. The subcommittee concurred with 6 pieces of narrative requesting reports. In the Office of Public Defender on pages 7 and 8, the subcommittee concurred with the general fund reduction to increase the turnover expectancy for contractual positions. In the Office of the Attorney General on page 9, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting a report on the final implementation of the Access to Counsel and Evictions program. On page 10 and 11, in the Public Service Commission, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting a report on the residential utility terminations and arrearages, and with the deletion of 2 positions and associated funding included in the supplemental budget number 1. Subcommittee also adopted narrative requesting a report on apprenticeships in the public utility industries. On page 12, for the Uninsured Employers Fund, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting a report on the need for a third-party administrator. In the Workers' Compensation Commission on page 13, the subcommittee concurred with a reduction of special funds to increase their turnover expectancy. In the Maryland Energy Administration on pages 14 through 17, the subcommittee concurred with a reduction of double budgeted special funds. The subcommittee concurred with 3 pieces of narrative requesting reports on the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, federal grants available to MEA, which is Maryland Energy Administration, and funding in detail. The subcommittee also modified narrative requesting a report on the use of SEIF, Strategic Energy Investment Fund revenues, to account for actions in the supplemental budget number 1, reducing and realigning these funds. The subcommittee adopted a narrative requesting a report on battery storage capacity. The subcommittee also concurred with the language making funds contingent on legislation authorizing the expanded use of those funds. In the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention on page 18 through 21, pages 18 through 21, subcommittee concurred with language restricting funds pending submission of a report on Victims of Crime Act awards and funding. The subcommittee added language requiring that the state aid for police protection enhancement funding be allocated to jurisdictions based on violent crime rates. The subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting a report on state aid for police protection enhancement, language deleting 3 new regular positions, and language restricting funds pending submission of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board fiscal 25 report. On page 22, in the Maryland Cannabis Administration, the subcommittee concurred with language restricting funds pending submission of a report on MCA's, on the Cannabis Administration's Cannabis Incubator Project. In the Maryland Thoroughbred Racetrack Operating Authority on page 23, the subcommittee concurred with the narrative requesting project updates. On pages 24 and 25, in the Planning Department, the subcommittee concurred with language deleting funding and positions provided for fiscal 2025 and 2026 in supplemental budget number 1, and reducing funding for the Maryland Historic Revitalization Tax Credit Program's small commercial tax credits. In the Maryland Department of Emergency Management on page 26 through 28, the subcommittee concurred with 3 pieces of narrative requesting reports on the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund, state and local cybersecurity efforts, and disaster relief for businesses. The subcommittee also concurred with language deleting funding for 2 new positions. In the Department of Veterans and Military Families, on page 29, the subcommittee concurred with 2 pieces of narrative requesting quarterly reports on the operations of the Charlotte Hall Veterans Home and the Maryland Joint Forces Initiative. On page 30, in the Maryland Automobile Insurance Fund, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting quarterly financial statements for the insured and uninsured divisions. On page 31, in the Maryland Insurance Administration, the subcommittee concurred with the 2 pieces of narrative requesting a report on the status of the insurance tracking system project and the status of insurance fraud investigations. The subcommittee adopted 2 pieces of narrative requesting reports on rate assignment by zip code and efforts to support insurance industry apprenticeships. On page 33, in the Office of Administrative Hearings, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting additional measures on alternative dispute resolution technique usage in the agency's annual Managing for Results submission. For the comptroller, on page 34 and 35, the subcommittee rejected 2 pieces of narrative requesting reports on cryptocurrency payments and baby bond accounts. In the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission, on page 36, the subcommittee concurred with the narrative requesting additional measures in the agency's MFR submission. In the Department of Transportation, on pages 37 and 38, the subcommittee concurred with language expressing intent and requesting a report if changes are proposed. On pages 39 through 41, for the Department of Transportation Secretary's Office, the subcommittee concurred with deletion of a new position with narrative requesting a report and with 3 pieces of budget bill language restricting funds to the intended purposes and making an appropriation contingent upon legislation. In the Department of Transportation debt service requirements, on pages 42 and 43, the subcommittee concurred with annual budget language establishing debt limits and requiring reports. In the State Highway Administration, on pages 44 through 48, the subcommittee concurred with deletion of a new position and with narrative requesting 4 reports. The subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on the process for approving speed cameras for local governments and the adopted narrative requesting 2 reports. In the Maryland Port Administration, on pages 49 through 41, the subcommittee concurred with language restricting funds pending a report with narrative requesting 4 reports. The subcommittee adopted narrative requesting 1 additional report. On page 52 of the Maryland Vehicle Administration, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting a report on insurance coverage verification and the impact of electric vehicle adoption on the vehicle emissions inspection program. In the Maryland Transit Administration, on pages 53 and 54, the subcommittee concurred with language deleting 76 positions and associated funding. The subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting 2 reports. The Maryland Aviation Administration, on page 55, the subcommittee concurred with the deletion of 1 new position. In the Maryland Transportation Authority, on pages 56 through 58, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting 3 reports. The subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on vulnerability assessments for the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. On pages 59 through 63, in the Department of Natural Resources, the subcommittee concurred with 3 pieces of narrative requesting reports. The subcommittee has also concurred on language restricting funding for a Deep Creek Lake pilot project and the submission of a report on whole Watershed Act funding. The subcommittee also adopted 2 pieces of narrative requesting a report and added language restricting funding pending submission of an MOU. In the Maryland Department of Agriculture, on pages 64 through 69, the subcommittee concurred with language deleting 2 positions, 11 contractual conversions, the federal funds that will not be received, and the federal funds that will not be received. The subcommittee concurred on reducing funds for the Maryland Leaders in Environmentally Engaged Farming, Maryland LEAF program, and making the remaining funds contingent on the legislation and restricting funds pending a report. On pages 70 through 77, in the administration and offices function of the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, the subcommittee concurred with language restricting funds pending submission of 4 reports and increased the amount of funds withheld pending submission of a report on efforts to eliminate mandatory overtime. The subcommittee also concurred with 3 pieces of narrative requesting reports and 1 piece of narrative requesting expanded MFR reporting. The subcommittee also adopted language restricting funds until DPSES submits a letter confirming the submission of all reports requested in 2025 Joint Chairman's Report. On pages 78 through 83, in the corrections function of the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, the subcommittee concurred with the language restricting funds pending submission of a report, as well as 3 pieces of narrative requesting reports. The subcommittee also concurred with language reducing funds due to anticipated liquidated damages. In the community supervision function of the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, on pages 84 through 87, The subcommittee concurred with language restricting funds pending the submission of 1 report and the narrative requesting 2 reports. The subcommittee concurred with language making funding for body-worn cameras for community supervision agents contingent on the enactment of legislation allowing their use. The committee also concurred with language making body-worn camera policies a mandatory subject of collective bargaining with the employee union and requesting a report. In the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services pretrial detention and services function, on page 88, the subcommittee concurred with language restricting funds pending a report on compliance with the Duval versus Moore decree. And on pages 89 through 90, in the Department of the Environment, the subcommittee concurred with 2 pieces of narrative requesting a report on the Maryland Used Tire Cleanup and Recycling Fund and a report on enforcement and inspection position strength assessment. On pages 91 through 92 of the Maryland Environmental Service, the subcommittee concurred with 2 pieces of narrative requesting an annual funding statement and a report on the implementation of a recycling program in Ocean City. In the Department of Juvenile Services, on pages 93 through 95, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on certain practices of the department, recidivism data, evaluations performed regarding youth outcomes, and the availability of evidence-based services. The subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on an apprenticeship program for community-based manager specialist positions. The subcommittee rejected language restricting an appropriation to be used for a particular purpose. In the Department of State Police, on pages 96 and through 99, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting a report on a consent decree and federal grants. The subcommittee adopted narrative requesting quarterly reports on personnel measures. The subcommittee concurred with language reducing 15 new positions and reducing 2 special fund authorizations. Lastly, the subcommittee concurred with the addition of a section of the budget bill restricting funds pending the submission of the 2024 Uniform Crime Report. That concludes the subcommittee report. I wish I had brought up my bottle of water. But can we have a motion to adopt the subcommittee report?
Okay, any questions for the new chair of the subcommittee? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much, great
Thank
job.
you. Thank you. Thanks.
We good now? Senator Zucker, you can move on up, but we have Senator King. Apparently, we have missed a sheet.
Yes.
So we need to add that into your report, inadvertently left out.
Okay. You want me to read it, or what do you want me to do?
I think, I'm going to guess that, what's that? Laura's good.
Okay.
Chairman, you want me to start with capital, and then we'll...
1 second.
Yep.
We're dealing with an
Yeah, agreed.
inadvertently left out sheet.
Yep, no problem.
Yes, this is a report for a study committee narrative for a study on the feasibility of establishing a $25 per hour minimum wage for non-certificated education support professionals.
Okay. Move to add this to EBA's report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. And now, I can't wait to hear what you're going to say, Senator.
Do you want me to wait a little bit, Mr. Chairman, and build up this
No,
suspense?
no.
All right, just
No,
checking.
I mean, it's a pretty thin report.
Got a lot of words
Did
in
you
that.
do anything this year?
But I have a prepared 30-minute speech. Do you want me to cut it down?
It's up to you.
All right.
We'll see what the members think about that.
Mr. Chairman, colleagues, proud to present the pay-go part of the capital budget. Just for people that are watching, this is not the miscellaneous or legislative bond initiative part of the capital budget. This is the pay-go piece that accompanies the operating budget. So first, I wanted to start by thanking the Vice Chair of Capital, Corey McCray, as well as Senator Paul Quarterman, Senator Shelley Heddleman, Senator J.B. Jennings, Senator Nancy King, and Senator Jim Rosapep. We couldn't do it without our fantastic teammates. I want to thank Committee Counsel Deneen Banks, as well as our amazing budget analysts, Scott Benson, Andrew Gray, Laura Hyde, David Propert, Yashidara Ray, Elizabeth Weibel, and Madeline Millers. Thank you for all your help, who's sitting to my right, as well as Matt Klein, who's always on call. And I appreciate Lily Davidson, who helped edit this document. Colleagues, turning to the actions of the Subcommittee on Capital, on pages 1 through 3 in the Department of General Services, the Subcommittee added language restricting fiscal 2025 deficiency funding for the purpose of providing a grant to the Maryland Economic Development Corporation for the dredge material replacement costs associated with the Trade Point Atlantic Sparrows Point Container Terminal project. The subcommittee added 2 pieces of language require the funding added via supplemental budget number 1 for this purpose also be provided to the Maryland Economic Development Corporation. Also related to supplemental budget number 1, the subcommittee concurred with the House to delete funding for a study that is not capital eligible. Colleagues, on pages 4 through 5 in the Department of Natural Resources, the subcommittee concur with the House to restrict $3.5 million in program open space state funding for a grant to the city of Hyattsville to purchase a property park, and added another $3.5 million restriction for 2 projects, one Hillside Park in Baltimore City and Adventure Sports Park within Wheaton Regional Park. Additional actions, colleagues, related to the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Ag will be discussed in the full committee. That concludes the subcommittee report. I would move adoption of the subcommittee report. Are there any questions?
Going once, going twice? He's back.
Mr. Chairman, you want me to start over? No.
I don't even have anything to say. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Great job as always. Okay, we've got to move to full committee items. Yes?
Just a minute.
But we're going to take a couple minutes to get organized here. Bunch of stuff to pass around.
It's just my. There won't really be any opportunity to at this time. It will.
No green tea.
I could have brought some. I feel like I look so angry in the video. The angle is not good for my like heavy brow. Ankle is good.
Okay. Okay, 3 and 25 and 13. Yes, it was in PST.
We do this, just say that you want to change that report to comments about the board.
Okay.
All right, let's get started. This is full committee, and then we'll maybe intersperse with BRFA. Or is that how we're doing it?
Yeah, we'll be starting with actions pertaining to the budget bill first, and then moving on to the BRFA.
Okay, very good.
Start, Ashley.
Beginning on page 1 is the payments to civil divisions of the state. DLS's recommendation was to concur with governor's allowance. The agency concurred, and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
On page number 2 is the budget for the Maryland General Assembly. The recommendation was to concur with the Legislative Policy Committee. However, if you turn to page 1 of the salmon-colored packet, there are 2 reductions being proposed that add up to $3.2 million for interior renovations to legislative buildings and to accrued leave payout.
Yeah, you're going to need to pull the mic up,
Yeah.
Steve.
So, you need that re-explained?
You need to
Move to adopt.
move to,
Page 1.
we're good. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Beginning on page 3 is the State Board of Elections. Recommendation number 1 is to delete special funds for SBE's new IT project to defer the project. The agency disagreed. The first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Action number 2 is a committee narrative requesting quarterly reports on all major IT projects. The agency concurred. The first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Turning to
Yeah,
page...
just so you know, I mean, if you need to jump in with a different vote, you need to make yourself heard, because we're just going to keep moving.
Turning to page 5 is the additional first house actions. This is also a committee narrative requesting a report on the readiness of 2 major IT projects for the upcoming 2026 and 2028 elections. The first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
There is an additional page for your consideration on pages 2 and 3. This is a committee narrative requesting SBE to establish a work group to study and report, including recommendations on vote-by-mail ballot accessibility.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Now moving to page 7, if I could just ask you to skip page 6 for now. So page 7 begins the Department of Budget and Management, Office of the Secretary. Action number 1, DLS recommended restricting funds pending a report on funds remaining to expend from the State Fiscal Relief Fund Award. The agency concurs and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Number 2, DLS recommended restricting funds pending receipt of performance measures for the Audit and Finance Compliance Unit. The agency concurs and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 8, item 3, DLS recommended committee narrative requesting a report on efforts made to improve training, recruitment, and retention of state agency fiscal staff. The agency concurs in part, agreeing with the existence of the issue, but disagreeing with the role that places on DBM, and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 4, DLS recommended annual narrative requesting submission of budget details for contracts and grants. The agency concurs and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 5, DLS recommended annual language limiting appropriations that can be placed into contingency reserve to items restricted by the General Assembly only. The agency agrees and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 11, item 6, DLS recommended annual language adding a tracking structure necessary for legislative audits and disallowing transfers of restricted funds. The agency disagrees and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 12, item 7, DLS recommended annual language requiring long-term forecasts of the general fund and other funds. The agency concurs and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 13, item 8, DLS recommended annual language applying across-the-board reductions to institutions of higher ed. The agency concurs and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 9, DLS recommended annual language requiring reporting on federal funds that are received by the state. And the agency concurs and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
On page 14, item 10, DLS recommended annual language defining the use of federal funds in the budget. The agency concurs and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 15, item 11, DLS recommended annual language requiring consistent presentation of budget data and organizational charts. Agency concurs and first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 17, item 12, DLS recommended annual language requiring reporting on interagency agreements and approval by the Department of Budget and Management. The agency concurs and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 19, item 13, DLS recommended annual language defining the budget amendment process. The agency concurs in part, agreeing with the goal of ensuring all budget amendments are submitted by October 31st, but requested flexibility for extraordinary circumstances. The first house adopted the language as recommended.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 22, item 14, DLS recommended annual language requiring the maintenance of accounting systems for certain programs. The agency concurred and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
There are also actions in the additional page packet for your consideration. On page 4 is additional language restricting funds in DBM to ensure that agencies with certain repeat audit findings collaborate with the State Chief Information Security Officer to resolve and report on those findings.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 6 is additional narrative requesting a report on primary care access for state employees.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 7 is additional narrative requesting a report on the Government Modernization Initiative.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 8 is additional narrative requesting a report on registered apprenticeships within state government.
Move to adopt.
Now moving to the Department of
those in
Budget and
favor?
Management personnel.
A little slow on the uptake, Mr. Chair.
Just a little.
On page 25, returning to the decision document. On page 25, item 1, DLS recommended restricting funds pending quarterly reports on prescription drug costs. The agency concurred and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 26, item 2, DLS recommended annual narrative requesting that DBM submit closeout information on the employee and retiree health insurance account. The agency concurs and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 27, item 3, DLS recommended reducing $95.6 million in total funds for fiscal 2026 general salary increases. The agency disagreed and the first house rejected.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 4, DLS recommended reducing $142.9 million in total funds for fiscal 2026 increments. The agency disagreed and the first house rejected.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 5, DLS recommended committee narrative requesting a report on funding of the supplemental retirement match. The agency concurred and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 28, item 6, DLS recommended annual language restricting the movement of employees into abolished positions. The agency concurred and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 7, DLS recommended annual language requiring monthly reporting on the state's workers' compensation account held by the Injured Workers Insurance Fund. The agency concurs and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 29, item 8, DLS recommended annual language imposing the rule of 100 limit on position creation. Agency concurred and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
On page 31, item 9, DLS recommended annual language requiring a report on state positions. The agency concurred and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 32, item 10, DLS recommended annual language requiring reporting of employee and retiree health insurance receipts and spending. The agency concurred and the first house adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On page 33, item 11, DLS recommended reducing funds for excess vacancy savings. The agency disagrees. The first house rejected the DLS recommendation and adopted an alternative reduction on page 34.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On page 34, item 12, DLS recommended reducing funding for judiciary employee merit raises. The agency disagreed and the first house adopted. This action is consistent with reductions in supplemental budget number 1 to merit raises for personnel not represented by a collective bargaining unit. And there's an there's an alternative reduction for your consideration shown on page 9 of the additional pages packet.
Move to reject House position, adopt the additional page.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The first house also took 3 additional actions on this budget on page on page 35. Item 1, the first House adopted narrative requesting reports on state employee overtime use.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Item 2, the House adopted narrative requesting a study on the feasibility of job sharing arrangements in state agencies.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
On page 38, item 3, the House added budget bill language implementing a $97 million across-the-board reduction to statewide expenses with certain limitations in anticipation of further spending reductions by the administration.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
There's also an action in the additional page packet for your consideration. On page 10, this language would require DBM to abolish 151 miscellaneous positions that were newly added in fiscal 2026. The abolishments would only apply to positions that DLS did not already recommendation for, as well as additional few groups that have been singled out to not be abolished.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
You sure? Senator Jennings?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
On page 39 of the decision document, we're now done with DBM, yeah. So now for the State Retirement Agency, DLS recommended concurring with the governor's allowance. The agency concurred and the first House adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 40, in the Maryland Supplemental Retirement Plans, DLS recommended concurring with the governor's allowance. The agency concurred and the first House adopted. However, there is committee narrative on page 11 of the additional pages packet for your consideration that requests a report on the fees imposed by MSRP.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 41 of the decision document, for the Department of Service and Civic Innovation, item 1, DLS recommended reducing a little over $1 million for a new customer relationship management system. The agency disagreed and the first House rejected.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 2, DLS recommended reducing 21 new positions and $1.7 million in funding to maintain the existing staff to participant ratio. The agency disagreed and the first House adopted.
All in
Move to
favor?
concur.
On page 42, for MSD funding for educational organizations, the action is DLS recommendation for language requesting a report for the BOOST program. The agency concurred and the first House adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 45 is the public debt. The first recommendation by DLS was a $2.9 million reduction to debt service. This recommendation assumes that the refunding savings anticipated would be spread over 6 years. At the hearing, it was discussed moving that forward to just 1 year. That is what the House did and increased the reduction to $27 million.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 2 is some narrative requesting that 2 bond sales be done a year. Agency disagreed, and the first House adopted.
Move to reject.
All in favor?
Aye.
And on page 46 of the public debt is a study to reevaluate the bond issuance assumptions. The agency concurred, first House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Moving to the State Reserve Fund on page 47, I'd like to start with item 10 to carve that one out. This is funding remaining in the DPA for this Capital of Quantum initiative. DLS recommended reducing $1.75 million from the total $17.5 million appropriation in the DPA for the Capital of Quantum initiative to reflect hiring needs over time. The agency disagreed and the first House rejected.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
For the remaining items in the State Reserve Fund, including items 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, and 14, these were recommendations to items in the DPA that were moved out of the DPA to the agency budgets by supplemental budget number 1. So therefore, the first House rejected these recommendations as the funding is no longer in this budget.
Move to concur.
Concurring all of those. All in favor?
Aye.
So the next several pages relate to reductions in fiscal 25 and additions for fiscal 25 and 6, and so I think we'll want to turn to the additional pages first and then go back to these pages. On page 12 of the additional pages, this first item reduces some funding that was provided for the 2023 Artscape Festival in fiscal 2024. It reduces the amount that was not needed or was not used for that purpose, and then would add the funds at the same level back in fiscal 2026, also for the purpose of Artscape.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On page 13 of that packet, this is a reduction.
Sir? What was your name?
Steve
Steve McCullough?
McCauley.
Steve McCullough, the one who is retiring after over 30 years of service.
Yes.
People who give their entire work life to public service. It's a special thing, and you've been extraordinary. And so we just really appreciate you and wish you the very best.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so on page 13.
Get back to work.
This is language reducing the Port Administration's operating and capital program by a total of $5.2 million, which frees up the funds from the trust fund to, on page 14, there's an addition of an add for $6 million to contribute towards that Trade Point Atlantic dredging project. My understanding is we drafted this to 2026 only, but we would understand that the desire would be to do $3 million in 2025, $3 million in 2026, so the same $6 million.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And then just one correction to an earlier piece of narrative that was adopted related to the port and to dredging. There was a report that PSTE adopted to ask for information on the impact of the dredging on 2 yacht clubs. That has the Maryland Port Administration as the author. My understanding is that really should be Commerce that is leading that effort with that, if that's okay.
Move to amend.
For the change. Yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Turning to page 15, so this is 2 actions. This was funding that was provided in fiscal 2025 to the Maryland Association of Boards of Education for direct primary care in Prince George's County. So this would reduce that funding and then add it back in fiscal 2025, but expand the jurisdictions to which the funds could be used.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On page 16, this is funding that was provided in fiscal 2025. It was part of a pilot project relating to busing opportunities. This would reduce the funds in fiscal 2025 and then add it in fiscal 2026 with a new grantee.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The next item on page 17 adds funds for a pilot program for commercial driver's license education and licensing as part of the CTE curriculum.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The next item on page 18 adds $50,000 to Morgan State University for supporting the Center for Equitable Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning Systems and assisting MSDE with some AI-related work and task force.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor?
The next item would add $100,000 in special funds to the Workers' Compensation Commission, contingent on legislation that requires them to appoint a special monitor for the uninsured employers fund.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The next item on page 20 is an addition of $1.1 million for a project for Clifton Park. There was funding provided for a different park in prior years that's not moving forward, and this would kind of provide that funding to that project.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On page 21 in the Developmental Disabilities Administration, this is the legislative addition to restore funding in DDA in fiscal 2025. This modification clarifies how dedicated hours removed from an individual's plan in fiscal 2025 should be reinstated.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
On the next page in 2020, on page 22, also in DDA, this is relating to the ads for 2026. These modifications clarify certain rates for the geographical differential and dedicated hours, and also sets the cap per person for the list program at $1,000 instead of $500.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
So then you have a single sheet that lists a number of additional general fund and special fund additions, as well as some other items.
Maybe not. We'll find it.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. The ad sheet?
Yeah,
Are you talking about the ad sheet?
yeah.
No.
Nope, nobody has it, except for me.
Yeah, I don't have it. It's good someone has it.
Somebody have it. Everybody have it now?
I don't have it. Thank you.
So with these kind of amended in, as well as some of the other actions that you've taken on this, and then the subcommittee reports in the decision document, you would want to move to modify section 19 that starts on page 49, 20 that starts on page 50, and section 21 that starts on page 51. Those reflect the House actions, and so on those sections, and you would want to modify them based on the actions that you've taken, including these additional pages.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so now we're moving ahead to the BRFA. So this is the long legal-sized paper.
So have we finished the budget?
What?
Have we finished the budget? Not quite. Yes?
No, there are actions related to the
That's what I thought. Okay.
BRFA, yeah.
Yep.
You'll
Okay.
still need the decision document and additional pages.
Okay.
So we're doing the Burford.
Going to the BRFA.
On item 1 on page 1, the first item specifies procedures related to horse establishment licenses, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's page
slow down.
1 on the kind of long sheet, legal size sheet.
Let me ask you a question.
Make sure she talks about the provision. Okay, we all set? Take this a little slower.
Okay.
Might be a few differences along the way.
Item 2, establishes administrative penalties related to beekeepers, and the House adopted.
Reject. First House, reject provision.
All those in favor of rejecting this? Not doing anything to the bees. Is there a bee named Calypso?
Item,
You're okay now?
We're not gonna, yeah. We're not changing the name, right? This is confusing.
We'll take as much time as you need, Senator.
Frank's trying, you're rejecting.
We're rejecting the House. The House adopted it.
You're gonna reject that, that's bad. And that's good, it's good.
We're rejecting everything related to bees.
All right, I'm good.
Item 3 reduces the mandate for tree planting
Yeah, we need to vote. All
on
in favor?
agricultural land.
Yes. Aye.
Please.
Item, was that on 3 or 2?
That was on 2.
Sorry, okay. On item 3, reduces the mandate for tree planting on agricultural land. The
Concur.
House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 4, alters administrative penalties related to nutrient management plans. The House adopted.
Reject First House, reject provision.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 5, increases the annual wholesale seedsman permit fee. The House adopted.
Reject First House, reject provision.
All in favor?
Aye.
Seeds and bees.
Item 6, eliminates mandates for the Maryland Native Plants Program. The House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 7 on the top of page 2, repeals the schedule for weights, registration fees for weights and measures, and authorizes the Secretary of Agriculture to set the fees, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Does Senator Borderman? Okay. Okay. Okay.
Are you raising your hand, Senator Jennings?
Actually, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
You do not?
I don't know.
Okay.
Item 8 requires the governor to use
Does
funds
anybody
from...
want to reconsider that?
No, mine's.
No, not you.
Mine's different from that. I mean, I've
Okay.
done this before.
Repeals the registration fee schedule. Okay. Okay.
requires the governor to use funds from the Cannabis Regulation Enforcement Fund to meet the mandate for the Social Equity Partnership Program, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Item 9 requires the governor to use special funds rather than general funds to meet the mandate for the Consumer Protection Division. The House adopted.
Concur.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Back in the decision document, page 61. Items, recommendations 2 and 3 on that page modify the language that made the funding reduction and appropriation contingent. It's a technical change to better align with what the provision actually does. The agency concurred and the House adopted.
Concur.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Back on the tally sheet, item 10 expands the allowable uses of the Securities Act Registration Fund to include operational costs. The House adopted.
Concur.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Item 11 on page 3 would alter the funding requirement for the victims of crime funding. The House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All those in favor?
Aye.
This is a good point just to mention something. I'm going to thank the House, chairs of both committees over there who handle our jurisdiction. We've worked very well this session to come to a lot of things that were important to, I think, our constituents. This is just one of them. VOCA provides very needed resources to help victims of crime. We're keeping a program that we started a number of years ago. We continue to fund it because we think it's that important. There's other examples of this. Obviously, we work very closely on developmentally disabled, but just thought I should mention at this point that it's been a real pleasure to work together with the House and the Governor's office to get through all these issues over this session. That's all.
Item 12 eliminates the mandate for the Maryland Waterman's Microloan Program in fiscal 2026. The House adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 13.
Before, did we vote on the VOCA one? Yeah, just in case. On the VOCA, to concur. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Item 13 phases out over 4 years the funding for the Tri-County Council for Southern Maryland. The House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All those in favor?
Aye.
You sure, Senator?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The item 14 eliminates the distribution from the uninsured motorist penalty to the Driver Education and Public High School Fund. The House adopted.
Reject first House, reject provision.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 15 reduces the funding for the Coordinated Community Supports Partnership. The House rejected.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 16 eliminates the required distribution from the uninsured motorist penalty to the state-aided institutions field trip fund. The House adopted.
Reject first House, reject provision.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 17 alters the mandate for the school resource officers program to be a mandate to the program rather than the fund, and the House adopted.
I apologize, I lost.
Here, concur.
Concur, thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye. Oh, I see.
Item 18 reduces the state share of the non-public placement program over 2 years. The House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 19 eliminates the funding formula for the St. Mary's College of Maryland. In 19 Admin Alt, DBM proposed striking the provision, and the House rejected its original, the original provision.
Concur with House to reject.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 20 would reset the hold harmless level of funding for the Baltimore City Community College. The House rejected.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Item 21 reduces the mandate for the Maryland Loan Assistance Repayment Program for the police officers and probation agents. And the House adopted.
Modified to mandate 500,000 in fiscal 25 and 2 million beginning in fiscal 26.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In the additional pages,
Oh,
item pages 24 and 25 would implement reductions or implement changes in the budget to fund it at those levels that you just adopted for the Borough Fund.
move to adopt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The next item, item 21, reduces the mandate for the Maryland police officers and probation agents to $200,000. The House adopted.
Is this 21?
It's 22.
22, okay, I'm sorry. Modify to mandate 500,000 in FY '25 and 2 million in FY '26.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On the additional pages, page 26 and page 27 make changes in the budget for fiscal 2025 and 2026 to effectuate that change for the mandate.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 23, back in the Burfa tally sheet, would authorize MDE to establish fees related to processing and certification related to sediment and erosion control. The House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Item 24 increases fees for the Wetlands and Waterways Program. The House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 25, increase the registration fees for rental dwelling units related to the lead program and other certifications. The House adopted.
Modified increase fees by half the amount of the original provision.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Got it.
Okay.
Item 26 increases the application fee for the voluntary cleanup program. The House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
You did? Okay.
Item 27 on the top of page 6 increases licensing fees and permit fees related to the surface mined land reclamation fund. The House adopted.
Modified to increase fees by half the amount of the original provision.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 28 would authorize the Department of Planning to use an additional $340,000 from their program open space funds for the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority program for operating expenses in fiscal 2026 only. The House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 29 removes the prohibition on the Developmental Disabilities Administration setting a limit on the individual directed and family directed goods and services. The House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 30 eliminates a prohibition on using the waiting list equity fund to supplant funds appropriated for certain purposes. The House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 31 eliminates a mandate for the statewide academic health center cancer research grants. The House rejected.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's another great one that we work together on.
In the decision document, item 62, or on page 62, I should say,
Page 62.
page 62 of the decision document. So this is a $15 million reduction from Medicaid, from the cigarette restitution funds in Medicaid that the House adopted. Basically, because you're restoring the funds for this program, you would need to have a cut of other cigarette restitution funds, so the House adopted this action.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page, back on the Burfa tally sheet, on the bottom of page 6 and continuing on to page 7, in item 32, this is a provision that establishes a Maryland primary care program, and there were some technical issues with the way the program was named and the agency it was related to. So 32 technical on page 7, proposed to correct those. The House modified those to incorporate those technical amendments, but also provide clarification on the type and source of the assessment.
Concur with the House modification.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On page 7, item 33, this provision eliminates the mandate for the Maryland Patient Safety Center Fund, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
You may have noted although we eliminated that mandate, we did put a couple $100,000 in the ads using our operating authority this year. It's an important program.
Item 34 authorizes the use of general obligation bonds to be used to meet the mandate for the Continuing the Core Partnership Fund. The House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
On page 63 of the additional document, of the decision document, there's 2 actions in the budget related to this. DLS had recommended deleting the funds directly in the budget. The House adopted that, as well as a technical change to strike the contingent language since the funds were being reduced.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Back on the Burfa tally sheet on page 7, item 35, this reduces the mandate for the long-term and dementia care navigation program from $2.4 million to $1.2 million. The House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On page 8, item 36 would establish an administrative fee to taxable employers to support the administrative expenses of the unemployment insurance. It would also then reduce the unemployment insurance tax that the employers then pay. In item 36, admin alt, it clarifies the eligible uses of the new fee, and the House adopted 36 along with the clarifying language in 36 admin alt.
Concur with House to adopt along with 36 alteration.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On page 64 of the decision document, recommendation 2 on that page. So on recommendation 2, DLS recommended making the $33 million that are included in the budget for the uninsured, the unemployment insurance division to be contingent on legislation establishing the fee. The agency concurred and the House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Back on the tally sheet on page 8, item 37 reduces the mandate for the Maryland New Start grant program to $50,000. Originally beginning in fiscal 2026, 37 technical would have that begin in 25 because there is a contingent reduction in a deficiency appropriation related to that, and the House adopted both of those.
You're doing the vote.
Move to concur with House with modify with 37 technical. Got it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 38 reduces the mandate for the Construction Education Innovation Fund, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On page 9, this reduces the mandate for the Career Pathways for Healthcare Workers program as introduced. It began in fiscal 2026. In 39 technical, it would begin in fiscal 2025 for the same reason as the other, because there's a contingent reduction related to that, and the House adopted both of those.
Concur with House to modify with 39.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 40 phases out over 2 years the mandated funding for the teacher retirement supplemental grants, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 41, this increases the cap on 2 contingency funds in the Maryland Environmental Service, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 42 eliminates the mandate for the Maryland Forestry Education Fund, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Opposed?
We got everybody? And
Oh. Oh, okay,
just this side.
okay.
Item 43 expands the allowable uses of the Chesapeake Atlantic Coastal Bays 2010 Trust Fund to support $10.5 million of operating expenses in DNR. DLS had recommended in 43 DLS alt, which is on the next page, to provide no limitation on that, and the House adopted the provision as it was introduced.
Concur with House to adopt provision as introduced and reject DLS alternative.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 44 increases the allowed amount of funds from the Waterway Improvement Fund to be used for marine operations of the Natural Resources Police, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 45 reduces the mandated appropriation for grants for warrant apprehension efforts, and the House adopted.
Concur.
Yeah.
I received some information from our analysts regarding the usage of those dollars, which are closer to 2 million than 1 million. I know we had discussions the other day about the drop of it going from 2 to 1 versus staying at 2. I'm sorry. You know, I received information from the analysts regarding the usage of those dollars. They're closer to 2 million versus 1 million, and we discussed the other day about the concern that I had regarding dropping it down to 1 million. There's great demand of our partners for this amount.
Let's hold that for the moment. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Item 46 eliminates the mandate for the Rent Court Workforce Solutions pilot program. The House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 47 eliminates the requirement that 20% of the amount in the budget for the Information Technology Investment Fund be set aside for expedited projects, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 65 of the decision document, DLS recommended striking the language that made the reduction contingent and reducing the entire funding for the expedited projects as the agency was still establishing criteria. The agency disagreed, and the House adopted.
Move to hold.
Isn't it? Usually?
Am I on the wrong page?
No, I didn't hear what you said.
I moved to hold.
Oh, we're on this page. Yes, sorry.
It's okay.
I'm still on this one.
I understand.
But we'll just hold. That's fine.
Thank you.
You don't need to move.
On page 48, or sorry, on item 48, on page 10 of the Burt Vitale sheet, this would set the amount of the revenue volatility cap to 0 through fiscal 2029, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 11, item 49, this would eliminate the requirement that the governor specify across-the-board reductions in 49 DLS alternative. We recommended applying that only to fiscal 2026, and the House adopted 49 DLS alt.
Concur with House to modify to waive only for FY '26.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In item 50, this would suspend for fiscal 2026 only the requirement to appropriate surplus to the rainy day fund, and it permanently eliminates the requirements related to the pension system and the Post-Retirement Health Benefits Trust Fund, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's 50.
In the decision document, pages 66 through 68 are a series of actions that would just reduce the funds for the rainy day fund and those two sweepers directly in the budget and strike the contingent language so that the funds could be reduced directly, and the House adopted all of those.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Back on the tally sheet on item 51, this would eliminate the required appropriation for the Maryland State Arts Council, and the House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All in favor?
Aye.
On the decision document on page 69, DLS had recommended taking a larger reduction to the State Arts Council to level fund the program and also strike the contingent language since it would be a larger reduction, and the House rejected both of those.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Back on the Burford tally sheet on item 52, this was a provision that would increase the tax rate on casino table games, and the House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In item 53, as introduced, it would increase the tax rate on mobile sports wagering from 15% to 30%, with it going to the general fund through fiscal 27, and then to the blueprint. The House modified that to have the tax rate increase from 15 to 20%, and the increase go to the general fund.
Concur with
entirely.
House modification.
All in favor?
On the top of page 12, this repeals the authorization for SEIF to hold interest and it removes it from an exemption from having interest directed to the general fund and authorizes a transfer of the interest in fiscal 25 to the general fund, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 55 expands the allowable uses of SEIF to include costs associated with the Air and Radiation Administration, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 56 expands the allowable uses of the Performance Incentive Grant Fund to include $1 million of operational expenses for the Office of the Correctional Ombudsman, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On 57, it reduces the mandate for the Maryland Service Year Option Pathway from $15 million to $13 million in fiscal 2026 only, and then alters participation targets in the Young Adult Service Year Option Pathway, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Item 58 reduces the state share of annual employer pension contributions for the teachers' retirement. DLS had recommended increasing it, so it was the total amount of the increase in fiscal 2026. And there's items on page 70 in the decision document and 28 and 29 of the additional pages that would make changes in the language to account for that larger reduction. The House adopted the provision as it was introduced at the level it was introduced, but made technical changes to the language related to the timing of payments and other implementation factors.
Move to concur with the House modification.
All those in favor? Opposed?
Item 59 on page 13 repeals the $50 million annual supplemental contribution to the pension system, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On item 60, that would cap beginning in fiscal 2026 the amount of the revenue attributable to a 20% tax rate on admissions and amusement tax to go to the Maryland Innovation Initiative at $8.5 million. The House adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 61, as introduced, required the comptroller to distribute $230 million from the local income tax reserve account to the general fund in fiscal 2025. And 61, admin alt, that would add a transfer of $40.6 million in fiscal 2026, in addition to the $230 million transfer, and alter the repayment amount that begins in fiscal 2029 to account for that larger transfer, and the House adopted.
Concur with House to modify with 61.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 14, item 62 eliminates the requirement that operating expenses in the Transportation Trust Fund forecast for years beyond the budget year be increased by certain levels, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 63 increases the debt outstanding limit on consolidated transportation bonds from $4.5 billion to $5 billion. The House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 64 expands the types of projects that MDOTs can use Garvey bonds to include major light rail rehabilitation and other related light rail activities, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 65, delays from fiscal, or from 2027 to 2032, the requirement for MTA to purchase only zero-emission buses, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
On item 66, this would authorize the MVA to increase the level of miscellaneous fees related to their cost recovery up to 115% rather than 100%. DLS had recommended rejecting that and changing the statute so that they wouldn't have to reduce their fees until they'd exceeded it for more than 2 years, and that they report the cost recovery as part of their forecast. The House adopted the original provision. However, if you turn to page 30 and 31 of the additional pages, this would modify that provision to require them to meet at least 100%, and then not require them to lower the fees until, unless they're projected to exceed 105%.
Move to modify the provision as shown on the additional page.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 67 would disallow the trade-in allowance under the vehicle excise tax credit if the purchase price exceeds $15,000, and the House rejected.
Concur with the House to reject.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 68 requires the MVA to collect a reasonable installment fee for individuals using vehicle registration payment plans, and the House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 69 accelerates by 1 year the vehicle registration fee for certain classes of vehicles. The House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 70 expands the allowable uses of the MEMSOF fund in fiscal 2025 and 2026 only to support general operations in the Aviation Command, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 71 would impose a retail delivery fee for certain retail deliveries, and the House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 72 authorizes the MVA to increase the fee for testing for VEEP from $14 to $30, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 73 reduces the estate tax exemption from $5 million to $2 million and repeals the inheritance tax. In 73 admin alt, DBM proposed as part of the repeal funding related to the Register of Wills who receives their funding through the inheritance tax. The House rejected both.
I concur with House to reject 73 and 73 admin alt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 74 reduces the cap on the student loan debt relief tax credit that MHEC provides from $18 million to $9 million in tax year 2025 only, and require them to submit a report with recommendations, and that House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 75, it would require, beginning in fiscal 2026, a reversion to the general fund of certain things related to the Maryland, More Jobs for Maryland Tax Credit Reserve Fund. And DBM in 75 admin alt proposed altering the provision to instead require that the comptroller distribute funds from the More Jobs for Marylanders Tax Credit Reserve Fund to the general fund based on the initial certificate, and it maintains a transfer of $4.3 million from the reserve fund to the general fund in fiscal 2025.
Concur with House to modify with 75.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 76 increases the local cost share amount that supports SDAT from 50% to 90%, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Opposed?
Item 77 phases out the enterprise zone tax credit by prohibiting new properties. And then in 77 admin alt, the administration proposed altering the provision to maintain the program but continue to phase out the state contribution as originally proposed, and the House rejected both.
Concur with the House to reject 77 and 77 alt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In item 78 on page 18, this provision altered the income tax rates and increased the standard deduction and a number of other income tax related things. The House modified to retain the repeal of the phase-in of the standard deduction and modification to the child tax credit and the new tax brackets for taxable income over $500,000, but they altered the increase in the standard deduction to an increase of 20%, eliminated the consolidation of the lowest 4 income tax brackets, and added a phase out. Instead of completely eliminating itemized deduction, it would be a phase out of itemized deductions for federal adjusted gross income above $200,000 at a 7.5% rate.
Concur with the House modification.
All those in favor?
Aye.
78.
78.
78.
Opposed?
79 applies a surcharge tax on capital gains for taxable income over 300 for tax years 2025 through 2028 for individuals meeting certain conditions. The House modified to establish the surcharge at 2%, with 1.25% going to the general fund and the rest going to the Transportation Trust Fund.
Concur with House modification.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Item 80 phased in a reduction to the corporate income tax over phased in a reduction to the corporate income tax over 2 years, and would establish Water's Edge combined reporting. The House rejected the portion related to the reduction in the corporate income tax rate over 2 years, but retained the combined reporting portion.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I move to reject the House adoption of combined reporting and concur with striking corporate income tax rate reduction.
Okay. All those in favor of that motion, raise your hand. Opposed? Okay.
Item 81 on page 19 increases the tax rate on cannabis sales from 9% to 15%, with 40% going to the general fund. And the House modified the tax rate increase from 9% to 12%.
Concur with House modification.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 82 increases the Medicaid deficit assessment over 2 years. The House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 83 eliminates the one-time mandate related to the 988 trust fund. The House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 84 repeals the requirement that the Department of Health apply for federal planning, development, and implementation grant funds related to certified community behavioral health clinics. The House adopted.
Reject House, reject provision.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Item 85 eliminates the mandated funding for the Public Broadcasting Commission. The House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On page 20, item 86 would have repealed the Low-Intensity Support Services Program in the Developmental Disabilities Administration, and 86 Admin Alt DBM proposed striking the provision. The House rejected the provision that was in the.
Concur with the House to reject the provision.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're going to take a short break here. Say just like 3 or 4 minutes.
No.
Okay?
Yep.
3 or 4 minutes. All right, let's get started again. All right, I'm going to go back to the hold on page 5 in the Burfa doc, page 10 in the Burfa document, BST 45. We had a hold on that. I'd like to move that we, but we're going to end up rejecting then the House position as it relates specifically to 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then we're going to move to page 65, where we had that hold, and maybe we need a description real quick, but I think we can take that hold off and vote on this.
So on 65, this relates to the expedited projects in the IT investment fund. DLS had recommended reducing all of the funding or deleting all of the funding for this program as the agency is still developing criteria, and then also striking the contingent reduction because it's a larger reduction, and the House adopted those.
Okay, we're going to move to adopt.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay. And now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Okay. On page 20 of the Burfa tally sheets, item 87 authorizes a transfer of about $204 million from the dedicated purpose account to the general fund. It includes a variety of things related to cybersecurity, some PAYGO funds, and the WAID initiatives, and the House adopted.
Move to modify, strike the transfer of funds in the weight and implementation.
Move to concur, I believe, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Item 88, as introduced, authorized a transfer of $150 million from the alternative compliance payments account in SEAF to the general fund in fiscal 2025. DLS had recommended increasing that to $180 million. DBM proposed increasing the authorized transfer to $230 million, and that's shown in 88 admin alt. And the House adopted the $230 million transfer.
Concur with the House to transfer $230 million.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And item 89, this would authorize a transfer of $9 million from the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund to the general fund. The House adopted. DLS recommended increasing to $12 million. The House rejected that and adopted the original 9.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 90, that authorizes a transfer of $7 million from the Police Training and Correctional Training and Standards Commission Fund to the general fund. The House adopted.
Reject first House, reject provision.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 91 authorizes a transfer from the Maryland Innovation Investment Tax Credit Reserve Fund. The House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 92, authorize a transfer of $5 million from the Securities Act Registration Fund to the general fund. The House rejected it. They replaced it with a transfer from a different fund that we'll get to later.
Concur with the rejection and replacement.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In item 93, this authorized a transfer of $4.9 million from the Maryland Violence Intervention and Prevention Program. The House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 94, this authorizes a transfer of $4 million from the Rate Kit Testing Grant Fund to the general fund. The House rejected.
Concur with the House to reject.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 95 authorizes the Department of Health to transfer funds among programs in fiscal 2025 and 2026. DLS recommended striking the provision, and the House rejected.
Concur with the House to reject.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In item 96, that authorizes in fiscal 2026 only the use of up to $16.5 million from program open space land acquisition balance for the Maryland Park Service, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 97 authorizes a transfer of $10 million from the Maternal and Child Health Population Improvement Fund to the general fund. DLS recommended increasing the transfer to $14.1 million, and the House modified that with a transfer of $13.1 million.
Concur with the House to transfer $13.1 million.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In item 98, this would authorize a transfer of a total of $4 million from 9 health occupation boards to be used in the Behavioral Health Administration. DLS recommended increasing the transfer to $10.1 million and altering the boards from which the transfer occurred. The House modified to a total transfer of $9.5 million, and again altered the boards from which the balances would occur. On page 32 and 33 of the additional pages, DLS is recommending that this transfer be reduced. The amounts of some of the boards that were included in that amount have transfers that are already scheduled to occur in 2025, and so not all of those funds are available.
Move to modify with additional page.
Concur. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item on page 71 of the decision document, we'll just modify that to base it on the amount that you agreed to transfer.
All those in favor?
Yeah, move it all. Move what she said. Sorry.
You know, this is an interesting moment to mention what Mr. Romans, who has been around here a long time too, I think over 30 years, is that right?
Yes. Let's not dwell on that.
Who said to us the other day that this is the budget in Burford that had the most actions on it that he's ever seen. So, you know, if we get a little punchy here, we understand that. A lot of work went into this, and there's a lot here. So, you know, give me, I'll say it again later, but it absolutely would be impossible to do this without DLS and our own staff. This is an extraordinary effort. Okay, back to it.
All right, 100 DLS additional. This authorizes a transfer of $20 million from the Land Records Improvement Fund to the general fund, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 23, 101 DLS additional, this would require local governments to be responsible for 50% of any payments owed to an individual for new erroneous conviction settlements entered into beginning in fiscal 2026, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Slow motion. No, I'm just reading that. That's a pretty,
Did you vote?
Yeah.
Okay.
102 DLS additional was a recommendation to authorize the transfer of $30 million from the administration account balance within SEAF to the general fund, and the House rejected.
Concur with the House to reject.
In 103,
All those in favor?
Aye.
103 DLS additional, this was a recommendation to reduce the required distribution from the state lottery fund to the major sports and events entertainment program fund to the amount necessary to $5 million instead of $10 million. The House adopted.
Reject first House, reject provision.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 104, this was a recommendation to reduce the statutory distribution of lottery revenues to the bus rapid transit by 10 million annually, and then restore the grant with 10 million from the Transportation Trust Fund. The House modified it by adopting the provision as proposed, but also modifying the minimum amount of funding that Montgomery County would receive if there are 2 eligible grantees, and also alter language relating to the bondability, to strengthen the bondability of the funds.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
In 105, DLS additional, this was a recommendation to authorize the use of certain funds from the Cigarette Restitution Fund for Medicaid in fiscal 2026 only. The House adopted.
Move to concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 73 of the decision document and page 34 of the additional pages, these are related items. Recommendation 2 was to reduce general funds within Medicaid by $25 million because of the availability of the cigarette restitution funds due to this provision. It says the House rejected that, but they had adopted that. However, DLS is recommending that reduction be contingent on the enactment of the legislation authorizing the use of the funds on page 34 of the additional pages.
Move to concur and adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Just back on page 73, this was related to, on page, item 6 on that page, that was a $60 million reduction that was related to the primary care program fund. Those funds were withdrawn in the supplemental budget, and so the first House rejected.
So what is the number?
It's item 6 on page 73.
All in favor?
Aye.
In item 106, DLS recommended prohibiting in fiscal 2026 the Interagency Rates Committee from increasing rates for certain providers over the rates in effect on January 1, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
In 107, DLS additional, DLS recommended reducing the percentage of the video lottery terminal proceeds allocated to the purse dedication account by 1 percentage point. The House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
Related to that, you would also want to reject reduction that DLS recommended contingent on that provision.
Move to reject.
All in favor?
In 108, DLS recommended limiting the expansion of the Tier 2 full-day pre-kindergarten eligibility through fiscal 2030 to remain at the 360% level that it is in this year, and reduce the per-pupil funding in fiscal 2026, and then reduce the per-pupil funding increase in fiscal 2027. The House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
In 109, DLS recommended eliminating the
All
Selinger.
in favor?
Aye.
109.
Speechless.
In 109, DLS recommends eliminating the Selinger formula and establishing a grant program at the level of about 36.7 million, and the House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
I guess so. All in favor?
In 110, DLS recommended eliminating the aggregate amount of the film production activity tax credit that may be awarded in fiscal 2026 to 12 million. That's just accelerating by 1 year, a change that will happen for fiscal 2027.
I'm sorry, I'm not where you are.
110 DLS additional.
We're 110. Okay,
Yeah.
concur. I got it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 111, DLS recommended authorizing the transfer of about 10% of the state-supported balances from the University System of Maryland institutions to the general fund. The House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All in favor?
Aye.
In 112, DLS recommended repealing the 7-day tax-free period for school back-to-school shopping. The House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All in favor?
Aye.
In 113, DLS recommended repealing the sales tax exemption for the sales of precious metal coins over $1,000. The House modified that to provide an exemption for sales at the Baltimore City Convention Center.
Concur with House modification.
All those in favor? What's that? It's a major event that occurs there every year. It's related to.
Other jurisdictions have shows and stuff too.
This is what's been brought before the House, before the body.
Other coin shows around the state too.
There are. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
One 114 would repeal the income tax exemption of $1,000 for seniors. The House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All in favor?
Aye.
In 115, DLS recommended authorizing the appropriation from the Clean Water Commerce account to be used to support the Water and Science Administration and MDE in fiscal 2026 only, and the House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All in favor?
Aye.
Based on that, you would want to concur with the House to reject the DLS recommendation to reduce $20 million contingent on that provision.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 116, DLS recommended reducing the mandated appropriation for the Community College Promise Scholarship Program from $15 million to $10 million. The House modified that to reduce the mandate to $12 million.
Concur with House modification.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 117, DLS recommended increasing the state transfer tax rate on high-value properties. The House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 118, DLS recommended repealing the distribution of lottery funds for the Maryland Humanities Council beginning in fiscal 2026. The House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All in favor?
Aye.
In 119, DLS recommended repealing the exemption for snack food from the state sales and use tax, and the House rejected.
Concur with House to reject.
All those in favor?
In item 120, DLS recommended expanding the allowable uses of the Senior Prescription Drug Assistance Program to include depositing funds into the health reimbursement accounts of certain state retirees. The House adopted.
Concur.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 77 of the decision document, this would reduce general funds by $3.1 million and make a $3.1 million special fund appropriation contingent on this provision, and the House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 121, DLS recommended redirecting to the general fund transfer tax revenues from fiscal 2026 through 2029 from the POS state Malcolm Rural Legacy Program and reducing the POS local so that the funds would go to the general fund. The House modified that to transfer or to direct 25 million of the transfer tax revenues from fiscal 2026 through 2029 allocated proportionally among the POS state land acquisition, rural legacy, and MALF program.
Concur with House modification.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
On
You raising your
page,
hand, Senator Jennings?
No, I'm gonna support that, as much as I hate to, it's tough. I'm gonna stick with the committee.
Thank you, Senator. You are a rebel, really.
on page 75 and 74 and 75 of the decision document. This would make reductions to the Rural Legacy Program and MALF contingent on this provision and the House adopted.
Concur.
All those in favor? Aye.
In 200 APP additional, they authorized a transfer of $5 million from the Mortgage Servicing Practices Settlement Fund. This was the replacement for the other transfer.
Concur.
All those in favor?
In 201, this establishes a sales tax on data and IT services with a tax rate of 3%, with the revenue going to the general fund. The House
Concur.
adopted.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Talk about that? Exactly.
Sure.
I mean, don't mind that. We had like a full hearing on it. What is the data IT service? What all does that encompass?
I mean, we have a list. It's in the documentation. We have that handy? Anyone? Why don't you give us what you're interested in talking about, and we'll hold this till the end. And
I just think, I mean,
it could be a lot of different things. It could be.
I'm just looking at.
One of the
here we are
things that's
raising
talked about
400
most is SaaS.
I get-
One of the things on the consumer side would be like web servicing, something like that.
No, I understand, it's a $500 million tax we're about to push through that
Yes?
we're doing in literally a 30-second vote, that I just think it's more than, deserves a discussion.
You're certainly welcome to do that.
But I guess, I'm speaking my piece, that I don't think, I think it's, Maryland is that's the concern, is the definition. I'm in the cyber world, the IT world.
Yep.
I-295 has got full IT companies based off U.S. Cyber Command and all these companies backing up NSA. Is it going to affect them, is the questions I'm getting from people. And I have not got an answer if that affects, and people are saying no because they're doing business with the federal government.
I think subs could certainly be affected.
That's the question. If it's the prime, the big, such as a Leidos or a Boeing, correct, they're not going to pay the tax. But when they sub to a smaller company, then they're going to pay the sales tax, and that's going to affect them, and it's going to have huge implications. And that's what I'm trying to figure out is, what is that going to do to our state, making it competitive? Are those companies going to compete on these contracts? Is it going to go out of state to companies like Virginia and others that are going to compete? That's my concern with this. So, with that, I'll be voting no. So.
Okay. Did you have something you want to say? You got your light flashing.
Well, I think we all know this is,
I'm hopeful over the next week or two, this time that we have here, as these things get to conference, that some of these questions will get answered. I have faith in the work that you're going to do with the House that they work. I think there's a lot of unknowns out there. I mean, we know what the codes are, but we don't know what they mean. The things that he brought up, we know there's a lot of businesses that the way this can be interpreted, I mean, you're talking thousands and thousands of businesses in all our major counties, not even the rural areas, the major counties, and how that's going to, really, how is that going to foster a economic growth environment that we're trying to portray here. So I just hope that over this next week within conference, we can get some answers to that. So, but as my friend from Baltimore County said, we'll be voting no on this as well.
All right, we're certainly welcome to have lengthy conversations about this. As I offered to your caucus, as well as our caucus today, that we would spend a bunch of time talking about this. If you had any questions, we'd work our way through that. And I'm willing to take the time with you to do that.
I'll reserve the rest of it for
Okay,
other discussions or on the floor.
very good. That's great. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
And in 202 APP additional, this repeals the sales tax exemption for the sales of photographic and artistic material used in advertising. The House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor? Okay.
In item 203, this applies a 6% sales tax to vending machine sales. The House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In item 204, this increases the maximum allowable local income tax rate to 3.3%, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Uh,
205 alters the trigger for a reduction in the income tax credit for certain seniors from 7.5% reduction between the March and September Board of Revenue estimates to 3.75%, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In
This
206.
was the, we've talked about this before, about these triggers. And this is one of a couple we've got going. This one, the blueprint.
In 206, this would close a loophole for captive insurance companies that are exempt from the income tax but also don't pay the premium tax, and the House adopted.
Move to reject House, reject provision.
All those in favor?
In 207, this alters the low-intensity support services program to allow for the establishment of a cap of no less than $500 instead of $2,000 per individual. The House adopted.
Move to modify to establish a cap of 1,000.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 208, this expands the allowable uses of the Community Services Trust Fund to include provider reimbursements in the Developmental Disabilities Administration for fiscal 2026 only. The House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 209, this expands the allowable uses of the mortgage loan servicing practices settlement fund to include legal assistance related to evictions, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
On page 61 of the decision document, the last item on that page, which is labeled as 1, it was an additional first house action. They added language to specify the source of funds in the supplemental budget related to access to counsel be from that fund contingent on legislation expanding the allowable uses.
This is on 61.
61, it's the last item on that page.
Gotcha. Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 210, this authorizes up to $11 million from the Expedited Service Fund in fiscal 2026 and 2027 to be used for general operating costs of SDAT. The House adopted.
Move to concur.
On page 6 of the decision document, the House reduced $10 million from SDAT contingent on this provision. They also added to the $10 million of special fund appropriation.
Move to concur.
Which number are we on?
Page 6.
Page 6.
Of the decision document. I think it's a great provision. Move to concur.
That's good. All those in favor?
Aye.
On page 28, 211 authorizes a transfer of $1 million from the Maryland Used Tire Cleanup and Recycling Fund to the general fund. The House adopted.
Sorry, what number are we?
211 on the top of 28.
211. Yeah, I say we concur. I second concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 212, this authorizes a transfer of $3 million from interest earnings in the Racing and Community Development Financing Fund to the general fund. The House adopted.
Move to modify to transfer $2 million.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 213, this increases the fee for an initial or renewal securities registration by $15, with $10 going to the Securities Act Registration Fund and $5 to the general fund. The House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 214, this sets the used tire fee at $1 and authorizes the fee to be increased based on inflation and setting the maximum at $2, and alters the agency responsible for setting the fee, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 215 increases various fees related to nurseries, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
216 increases the excise tax on vehicles to 6.8%. The House adopted. On page 38 of the additional pages, this would modify that so that the maximum is 6.5%. It would phase in over 2 years with an increase of 6.35% in fiscal 2026 and 6.5% in fiscal 2027 and after.
Move to modify with additional page.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 217, this would repeal the excise tax exemption for short-term rentals and establish a excise tax rate of 3.5%. The House adopted.
Move to reject House, reject provision.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 218, that doubles the fees for a certificate of title. The House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In
Yeah, 4 of them.
219, this would alter the definition of historic vehicles to vehicles older than the 1999 model year rather than 20 years old, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Strange things happen at late in the night.
People are paying too much attention. All right.
In 501,
Yes.
501 admin additional, this authorizes rather than requires unexpended funds for core service agencies, local addiction authorities, and behavioral health authorities to remain with those entities, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
502 modifies the eligible uses of the Board of Nursing Fund to remove a prohibition on the use of the funds for infrastructure operations. It applies only to fiscal 2025. The House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
503 would limit the restoration of cash assistance and SNAP benefits lost due to EBT theft based on the available funds in the budget, and it would set limits related to the dates by which the theft must occur to be replaced. The House modified to limit the program to the restoration of funds in the budget, but did not include the dates that would set the dates related to the benefit restoration.
Move to reject, House, reject the provision.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 504, this is a provision that would, for fiscal 2026 only, eliminate the requirement that at least 50% of funds from the cigarette restitution fund be used for certain purposes. Because of the restoration of the statewide economic health center, cancer research grants, that is not needed, but the House did modify the requirement in fiscal 2026 only that Medicaid receive at least 30% because of the reductions that were taken to restore that.
Move to concur with House modifications.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 505, this eliminates for fiscal 2025 and 2026 only requirements related to the opioid restitution funds not being used to supplant funds for the programs, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 506, administration additional, this requires a distribution of $37.3 million from the local income tax reserve account to the Department of Labor for the division of paid leave, and requires the department to reimburse the account within 2 years of beginning contributions in the family fund, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
507 amends the BRFA from last year to increase the authorized transfer from the Unemployment Insurance Reserve Fund for state employees by $20 million, and the House adopted.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In 508, this authorizes a transfer from the rainy day fund to the annuity bond fund through a budget amendment if it's needed to pay debt service.
Move to concur.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In the additional pages, on page 35, this would amend the allowable uses or expand the allowable uses of the alternative compliance payments for fiscal 2026 only to allow a total of $100 million to be used for solar development on state government property and local government clean energy projects. There's $100 million for these uses, and funds have been, and language has been added. You've agreed to add language that makes that funding contingent on a provision like this.
Move to adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
On page 36, this removes the judicial branch from the list of entities that are not subject to review by the Office of Program Evaluation and Government Accountability.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The items on page 37 are some additional transportation revenues. The first item would alter the rental car registration fees to be consistent with vehicle registration fees for the class of cars to which it belongs. And the second would establish a $5 fee for the purchase of each new tire.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor?
Opposed?
On page 39, this is a provision that does two things. So if the federal medical assistance match rate would decrease to 80% for those, or less for those who are who qualify for a 90% match on January 1. It would require the program to discontinue coverage within 120 days for those who qualified for the 90% match and whose annual household income is above 100%. And then if it, the second part of that is if it decreases to 50% or less for those who qualified for the 90% match rate on January 1, the program would discontinue coverage within 120 days for all who qualified for the 90% federal assistance match.
Move to adopt.
So this is another one of the triggers that we talked about a bit. Should we get some actions by the federal government that would change the way funding occurs, this provides for a mechanism to begin to deal with those. All those in favor?
Aye.
On page 40, this is language in the budget that would restrict the top portion restricts general funds to be used for the ACA expansion group, but also if the trigger is met and the coverage is discontinued, it would be used for providing assistance for medical care and health insurance costs, including subsidies for health insurance plans through the exchange for those disenrolled. And the bottom part restricts the federal funds to be used only for the expansion services and would cancel them if the funds are canceled.
Move to adopt.
All those in favor?
Aye.
More of that implementation. One more.
And the last item on page 41, this would provide that if the federal revenues for Medicaid or the CHIP program through a block grant or per capita calculation is 5% below the revenues compared to the fiscal 2026 budget appropriation that DBM certifies has occurred, then within 30 days, the Department of Health would have to submit a plan to the Legislative Policy Committee on a plan to reduce the state funds for the program by the amount of reduced federal revenue. So the DBM would have 90 days to make the determination, and there would be 30 days for the Department of Health to submit a plan.
Move to adopt.
So we were anticipating one of two possibilities that may occur here. The one, the two pages before, where they change the percentage of the match. And in this case, when they go to a block grant, which could change any amount of the amount of money in lots of different ways. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We hit it all?
We ran out of trees, so we're done.
Okay. Going to move the budget bill, House Bill 350.
So moved.
Yep. Comments?
Thank you. This is my 9th year here, or 8th year, excuse me, and 7 out of the 8 years I've been on the budget committee, whether it was in the House or here, and every year supported the budget. We appreciate the work in this committee, obviously, here, the work with you as chairman and everyone in this committee. We understand these are trying times and difficult decisions have to be made. We appreciate the collaboration and all the work that's gone into this. I think this year, unfortunately, it's a little bit of a bridge too far for some of us. But that should not be a reflection on our commitment to this committee or anybody here personally. We have constituents we represent as well. And so we are looking out in their interest here today. I just want to make that statement before we vote. So thank you.
Appreciate that, Senator. Always enjoy working with everybody on this committee. Okay, All those in favor of the budget bill, HB 350?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And now on the BRFA, House Bill 352. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. With that, I want to thank once again the staff. All of you are just tremendous. Really can't thank you enough. DLS, our own staff. I want to thank the secretary and her staff at DBM. The administration, lots of people who have played a role in this. The House, once again, and the cooperative arrangements we had this year with them. Obviously, we still have a little bit of work to do. Got a few differences here and there, but considering the magnitude of everything that we've done, there's a general overall agreement, and we'll certainly get there. I think as we go into what will ultimately be conference, we'll continue this relationships, and I think we'll come to the best possible solution we can. This is an extraordinary year in a lot of ways, probably not in the best of ways. We've been faced with a lot of issues, including most recently a write-down, and how we'd had to respond to that given the choices that we had in front of us. I'm proud that we were able to do that. I'm proud that this team maintained that civil discourse that I believe that we have here in the state, that I'm very proud of. And I know that we will get through till the end, and so I'm very grateful for all of that. So with that, thank you all very much. It's been fun. Well, hold on one second.
Yeah.
So as you know, we have the blueprint bill. I think the EE just, Triple E, just finished downstairs, but I don't think we have all the parts together to have that conversation tonight, so we'll have to regain that tomorrow. We have, what tomorrow morning?
Procurement at 10:30.
What's that?
Procurement at 1.
Yeah, we've got procurement at 1, but, and we have floor at 10:30, but we'll probably, I got to believe that around that, when we get off the floor at some point, we'll do some more voting. So we have time. We don't have anything blocked up on it. Just FYI, we'll start doing bill hearings, House bill hearings on Thursday. So that is where we stand. Any questions? Yes.
What's our schedule for tomorrow?
Tomorrow, we have your committee tomorrow at 1. But depending on what time we get off the floor, we may start early voting. We're going to have to take up the blueprint, and then we also have the Decade Act that we would need to hopefully get finished this week if we can. So, okay. All right. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.